The first time Soren Ellwood met the alien student, it was in the southeast wing of the Monroe Interstellar Exchange Institute, just outside the vending machines that only accepted retinal scans and, oddly enough, smelled faintly of cinnamon. Soren had been trying for 10 minutes to get a bag of salted pretzels to drop when the alien's voice startled him. "Your mouth configuration is incorrect for aggression, and yet you are baring your teeth." Soren turned, pretzel bag still dangling inside the machine, just out of reach. The alien stood about 6.5 feet tall, translucent bluish skin shimmering faintly under the corridor lights. Its eyes were vertical slits, dull amber. It wore the standard student sash in dull green, signifying a first-year xenocultural observer. "You talking to me?" Soren asked. The alien blinked slowly. "Yes, you revealed your teeth. This is indicative of hostility among many apex predators. You were not attacking the machine." Soren leaned against the glass. "No, I was frustrated, and I smiled because I thought it was funny. You know, the irony of a human engineer being defeated by a snack dispenser." The alien tilted its head. "You smile when something is not functioning properly?" "Sometimes. Depends on the situation." The alien stepped closer, observing Soren's face with disconcerting intensity. "Explain this behavior. I require this data." Soren rubbed the back of his neck. "Well, it's not just about malfunctions. We smile when we're happy, amused, nervous, sometimes even when we're lying. It's complicated." "I am Cael. I was told human expressions are inconsistent and potentially dangerous. Your teeth are sharp." Soren gestured at the vending machine. "Yours might be too if you met this thing. I'm Soren Ellwood, engineering advisor, you a student. I am an observer. I am to learn your cultural norms." "Your teeth display is illogical," Soren chuckled. "Welcome to Earth." Over the next week, Cael began to follow Soren between classes, lectures, and lunch breaks like an exceptionally polite shadow. Where Soren went, Cael trailed, recording, questioning, and rarely blinking. Their third encounter took place in a lecture hall after Soren's advanced mechanics presentation. Students filtered out, but Cael remained seated in the front row, hands folded neatly. "When you told the story about the collapsed bridge, you smiled," Cael said. "You said no one was harmed, but the structure failed." "Why smile?" Soren sat on the edge of the stage. "Because it was a close call. We got lucky. And sometimes, when things go wrong but no one gets hurt, we laugh. It's relief." "Would you smile if someone had been injured?" "No," Soren answered sharply. "Of course not." Cael recorded that, his fingers twitching briefly. "Then the display of teeth is conditional, not inherently hostile, not necessarily joyful either." "Exactly. It's about context. You can't just look at the teeth. You've gotta read the eyes, the tone, body, posture." Cael's eyes narrowed. "This makes human interaction difficult to scan. Tell me about it." "We confuse each other all the time." Soren didn't think much of it until 2 days later, when Cael followed him into the gym and promptly caused a minor panic by walking up to a weightlifter mid-set and stating, "You are baring your teeth." "Are you hostile?" The guy dropped his barbell onto his foot. That incident earned Cael a temporary ban from the gym, and Soren a warning from Director Mira, who told him, "Next time, don't let the alien interrogate people mid-bench press." Later, outside the infirmary, Soren leaned against the wall while Cael sat beside him, watching the weightlifter get his foot checked. "I did not intend harm," Cael said. "No one thinks you did. But you gotta ease into things. Humans don't always explain what they're doing either." That guy was grimacing from effort, not rage. Cael nodded slowly. "We do not display emotion with our mouths. Our expressions are in the pulse of our neck folds. You do not have neck folds." "Nope, just these." Soren flashed a half-smile. "But I get it. Your body's telling stories mine doesn't understand." Cael looked away. "I must recalibrate my assumptions." They didn't speak of it again until the day of the emergency drill. Sirens blared across the campus, and students flooded the hallways in orderly chaos. Soren was directing students toward the shelters when a sudden tremor shook the building. A ceiling panel dropped. Soren barely pushed a student away before debris struck his shoulder. He crumpled against the wall with a cry. He vaguely heard Cael shout his name. When he came to, he was lying on the infirmary bed, arm in a sling, pain radiating from his collarbone. "Fracture confirmed," the nurse muttered. "We'll keep him overnight." Cael stood rigidly at the foot of the bed. "You're injured," Cael said. "Yeah," Soren winced. "Clavicles cracked. Gotta wear this sling for 6 weeks." "I observed your expression before impact. You were angry. But then you smiled." "Why?" Soren exhaled slowly. "It's not always logical, I think. Maybe I smiled because I saw the kid was okay," Cael recorded the statement. "So even in pain, the display can signal reassurance." "It can, but don't take it as a rule. Humans are unpredictable." "I no longer assume consistency," Cael said. The next day, Soren was discharged with painkillers and strict instructions not to lift anything heavier than a coffee mug. Cael showed up at his apartment carrying groceries and a small toolkit. "I calculated the probability of your compliance with resting orders," Cael said. "Lo," Soren raised an eyebrow. "You brought tools. For you to instruct, I will lift, you will direct. This maintains both your recovery and your apparent need for control." Soren couldn't help laughing. "You're learning, Cael." The following week, Cael began conducting interviews with other humans, carefully noting every instance of smiling, grinning, or laughing. He brought each case back to Soren for analysis. Subject laughed after spilling coffee on self. "Embarrassment," Soren said. Subject smiled when coworker insulted them. "Passive-aggressive, that one's complicated." Subject smiled while crying, Soren sighed. "That's grief. Sometimes people smile remembering good things even when they're sad." Cael paused. "Your species is emotionally contradictory. You're not wrong." The breakthrough came during the intercultural symposium. Cael was presenting his paper, Teeth Displays Among Homo Sapiens, Misconceptions and Contextual Nuance. Soren sat in the front row, arm still in a sling, watching Cael pace the stage. "Initial assumptions categorize the human smile as a threat gesture," Cael said. "This is erroneous. The display of teeth in humans is a multi-contextual signal. It can indicate joy, relief, anxiety, submission, or deceit. It should not be interpreted in isolation." He clicked through slides showing smiling humans in various scenarios: weddings, funerals, job interviews, war zones. Interpretation requires holistic analysis. Tone, eye movement, posture all must be considered. The smile is not a warning, it is a language. The alien audience was silent, then one of the panelists raised a hand. "But is this not dangerous? If humans can smile while lying, how can one ever trust them?" Cael looked toward Soren, then back at the panel. "Because they also smile when they save others, when they forgive, when they survive. If you understand their language, you will see the difference." Soren didn't realize he was smiling until Cael added, "And sometimes they smile when they're proud of someone else." Later that evening, Cael found Soren on the observation deck, watching the stars. "You did good up there," Soren said. "I did not bare my teeth." "No, but I could tell you were pleased." Cael hesitated, then sat beside him. "I have recalibrated my understanding. The human smile is not a threat, it is a mirror." Soren glanced at him. "You planning to write that down?" "No. I want to remember it." They sat in silence as the earth rotated slowly below, the stars stretching outward, infinite and quiet. 3 days after the symposium, Soren's sling began to chafe. He sat on a bench outside the East Wing's botanical dome, fiddling with the strap and cursing under his breath. The dome's humidity had turned the inside of the brace into a damp torture device. He'd already loosened it once, which the campus nurse had specifically warned him not to do. "You are adjusting the brace incorrectly," Cael said, appearing without sound or warning as usual. "I'm aware," Soren muttered. "I'm also trying not to smell like a compost heap." Cael crouched beside him, scanning the brace. "The human epidermis is not adaptive to persistent moisture. You should request a breathable variant. They are out. Next shipment's not for another week. Unless you've got a spare sling tucked in that sash of yours, I'm just going to have to suffer creatively. Cael placed a small metallic cube on the bench. I have fabricated a modular support. It uses a synthetic mesh that facilitates airflow, no adhesives, adjustable straps. Soren blinked. You made me a custom sling? Yes. I observed over 100 images of shoulder injuries in human databases. The most common complaint was overheating. You spent your free time designing this, Cael tilted his head. You are my primary case study. Your discomfort compromises observational consistency. Right, Soren said, already undoing the old sling. Purely scientific. Cael fastened the new brace with quick, deliberate movements. The mesh was cool against Soren's skin, feather-light but stable. He flexed his fingers. No pinch, no pull. This is amazing, he said. Feels like it's not even there, Cael stood. I will monitor its performance. If your range of motion improves or declines, I will adjust the tension. You know, Soren said, leaning back against the bench, most people just sign a get well card. I considered that, but the phrasing on such cards is imprecise. Hope you feel better implies uncertainty. Get well soon imposes a deadline. Thinking of you lacks specificity. Welcome to human empathy, Soren said. It's a mess, but we mean well. Cael lowered himself onto the other end of the bench, careful not to sit too close. I have begun to review your historical trauma logs. Soren glanced sideways. That's a grim hobby. Your species documents disasters obsessively. Fires, plagues, planetary collapses, civil implosions. You archive suffering with extraordinary detail. Helps us learn from our mistakes. Or try to anyway, Cael's eyes flickered. In the records from Oslo, your people used humor while evacuating. One man wore a wedding dress. Another played a trombone while wading through floodwaters. That sounds about right. Why? Soren scratched his chin. Sometimes we cope by making chaos funny. It's a defense mechanism. You laugh or you break. Cael looked at the dome's glass ceiling. The afternoon sun cast hexagonal shadows across his hands. You fracture often. Too often, Soren said, but we heal. Not always neatly, but we do. A light chime sounded from Cael's wristband. He stood. My assigned rotation begins in 6 minutes. I am scheduled to observe behavior at the cafeteria's condiment station. Apparently it is a site of frequent conflict. Soren laughed. Oh yeah, the hot sauce wars. Good luck. That evening, just before lights out, Soren found a note slipped under his door. Cael didn't do handwriting, so it had to be from someone else. The paper was thick, the lettering careful, human. You are invited to a cross-species social study. Attendance required. Location: Dome 3. Time: post-dusk. Bring no tools. Soren checked the timestamp. Less than an hour from now, he threw on a jacket, ran a palm through his hair, and left. Dome 3 was usually used for hydroponic trials, rows of leafy greens under sun lamps, tanks of nutrient-rich water humming gently. But tonight, the plants had been pushed aside. A circle of mismatched cushions had been arranged in the center, and 10 or so aliens of various species occupied them, some seated, some coiled, one suspended upside down like a translucent jellyfish chandelier. Cael stood near a table where a large pot bubbled quietly over a portable heat coil. You made it, he said. I didn't realize this was a potluck. It is not. This is a controlled experiment in shared consumption. You are the control subject. Soren raised an eyebrow. You cooked? No. The formulation was synthesized by the tamper delegate. It contains no allergens, no toxins, and no flavor. No flavor. The intent is to observe social bonding absent gustatory pleasure. If bonding still occurs, it may indicate that humans engage communally even without sensory reward. Soren accepted the offered bowl. The contents were gray and gelatinous. This looks like wet drywall. Correct, he sat. Across from him, a tall, feathered alien with copper eyes blinked once, slowly. To his left, a creature that resembled a sentient stack of pebbles puffed out a ring of blue vapor. Everyone watched him. Soren took a bite. It didn't taste like anything. Not in the bland way oatmeal might fail to impress, but in the way a dream might fade before you can name it, he swallowed. Thoughts? Cael asked. Soren considered. It's like chewing the concept of waiting in line. Several aliens made small noises that might have been approval. The feathered one leaned forward. Why did you agree to come? You invited me. There was no incentive, Soren shrugged. I was curious. The pebble stack rumbled. Curiosity that overrides caution. This is common, depends on the person. But yeah, we're pretty nosy. A small creature with skin like damp velvet spoke from the ceiling. If you had been harmed, what then? Then I'd heal, or not. But I'd still want to know what I missed. Cael nodded, almost imperceptibly. The rest of the evening passed in quiet conversation. No one tried to impress anyone. No one told jokes. But by the end, they all stayed a little longer than required. When Soren stood to leave, the feathered alien tapped its talon lightly on the floor. You are unlike the others. Humans? No, researchers. They do not eat drywall gel and then ask for seconds, Soren grinned. Guess I'm just built different. The group dispersed slowly. Cael walked with him back toward the dormitories. You were not expected to enjoy the gathering, Cael said. But you participated fully. I figured if I was going to be the control group, I might as well commit. Would all humans do the same? No, some would have bailed, some would have brought hot sauce. Cael looked thoughtful. You adapt even when unnecessary. Without benefit. It's not always about gain, sometimes you just show up. They reached Soren's door. He paused. You know, he said, none of those species smiled. Most do not. Their languages are kinetic or chemical, and they still connected. Even without flavor or facial expressions. Cael nodded. Connection is not limited by anatomy. Soren looked at his door, then back at Cael. Neither's understanding. Cael didn't respond immediately. Then, almost hesitantly, he lifted a hand and extended 2 fingers in a gesture Soren had seen once before, used among Cael's kind to denote respect. Soren returned it, fingers nearly touching. The door clicked closed behind him. Inside, the room was quiet. He peeled off his jacket, rotated his shoulder gently. The sling held firm, cool and supportive. He smiled to himself, not for anyone else, not as a signal, just because. The new brace held up better than Soren expected. After 4 days of use, he'd almost forgotten it wasn't standard issue. The breathable mesh wicked away sweat silently, and the tension-adjustable straps meant he could sleep without waking up with his arm numb. The campus nurse had taken one look at it, raised both eyebrows, and muttered something about whatever keeps you out of my office. Late in the afternoon, while the sky turned a hazy orange above the Institute's solar array, Soren sat in the outdoor seating ring near the West Habitat enclosure, a place favored by non-humanoids who disliked chairs. Cael arrived carrying a small, flat device that resembled a flattened compass. I have obtained motion data from your shoulder over the past 72 hours, Cael said. I didn't know you were tracking me. You authorized passive monitoring when I offered medical assistance. I thought you meant like checking in verbally. Ambiguity in consent is a human flaw. Soren blew out a breath. I'm not arguing. Just surprised. Cael placed the device on the table. A projection hovered above it, a semi-transparent model of Soren's upper torso, with his shoulder joint pulsing in red, yellow, and green gradients. You have exceeded the suggested range of safe motion 12 times, Cael said. 7 of those instances occurred during what your schedule labels as light stretching. Soren leaned back. I didn't think I overdid it. You reached above your head. I was getting coffee mugs. That hardly counts as reckless. You also reached behind your back. 4 times, adjusting a hoodie. Then you attempted to open a stuck window, twice. Soren rubbed his forehead. Okay, fine, I may have underestimated how much I move without thinking. Cael tapped the table. The projection shifted to a simplified model highlighting stress points. He handed Soren a small vial. This contains a cooling gel used by the Gorari species. It reduces localized inflammation without impeding joint mobility. Apply it only at night. I'm not sure if I'm supposed to be your subject or your side project. You are both. You are also my friend, Soren paused. That's the first time you've said that directly. I have analyzed the definition extensively. The term applies. Before Soren could reply, a low chime echoed across the enclosure, followed by the voice of Director Mira broadcasting from every wall speaker. Attention! All faculty and students are required to report to their designated assembly zones for emergency protocol review. This is not a drill, Soren groaned. What now? Cael stood. Zone 17. Near the aquatic labs. Of course, it's on the opposite side of campus. By the time they reached the assembly point, a crowd had already gathered. The air smelled faintly of ozone, and overhead, the security drones drifted in a tight formation. Soren spotted a familiar figure near the edge doctor. Lishra, a senior biologist from the Yevan delegation, who was currently trying to calm down a panicking student whose skin emitted bright pulses depending on stress levels. I thought this wasn't a drill, Soren said. It is not, Cael replied. A cargo shuttle released a containment pod early. It landed short of the quarantine bay. Soren looked up. What kind of pod? Biological samples. No pathogens, but the hibernation chamber within failed. The specimen is ambulatory. Define ambulatory. It has legs. Great. Within minutes, a containment squad arrived, flanked by 2 security officers and a floating translator drone. They moved with unhurried precision, scanning the ground with a heat sensor array. Then the translator activated. Attention! The escaped specimen is a non-hostile herbivore. However, it is disoriented and may emit defensive pheromones. If you experience euphoria or sudden affection toward metal objects, report to medical immediately. Soren blinked. Did it just say metal objects? Yes, Cael said. The species forms temporary pair bonds with reflective surfaces under stress. It may attempt to court equipment. Why do I feel like I'm living in a very specific documentary narrated by someone who's lost control of the script? 2 minutes later, a small quadrupedal creature trotted around the corner, skittered sideways at the sight of the crowd, and latched onto the leg of a communications terminal. It began to vibrate softly. The crowd respectfully gave it room. A technician approached slowly with a containment blanket. The creature hissed once, then stopped vibrating and allowed itself to be wrapped up. As the technician passed by, the creature craned its neck and brushed its snout against a dangling wrench. I think it's in love, Soren said. It will forget within 6 minutes, Cael replied. Its memory retention is linked to pheromone saturation. The technician nodded toward the gathered students. False alarm. All clear. As the crowd dispersed, Cael lingered near the terminal, watching the last traces of the pheromones dissipate. That was the most peaceful lockdown I've ever seen, Soren said. Human responses to containment vary, Cael replied. This group maintained cohesion and avoided panic. That is significant, Soren flexed his shoulder. Maybe we're finally adapting to the place, or the place is adapting to you. They walked back under a sky turning purple. The solar panels rotated gently overhead, their tracking sensors clicking like beetles. Later that evening, Soren sat on his dormitory couch with a cold pack across his shoulder, the gel already taking effect. Cael stood at the window, looking out over the courtyard where a few students were playing a slow, deliberate alien variant of tag that involved glowing stones and no touching. You mentioned once that smiling isn't universal, Soren said, but connection is. I still believe that. So what do you think happens when you leave, when your observation term ends? I will return to my sector and submit a final report. My assignment ends in 12 days. 12? Yes, Soren sat forward. That soon you were aware of the timeline. I didn't think about it, Cael turned. I have recorded over 100 hours of human behavior. I have analyzed 17 cultural events, participated in 6, and consumed 23 different types of your food. I have gained what I came for. Soren looked down at the cold pack. And after you go, you will remain. You will continue to teach. New observers will arrive. Yeah. But they'll be new, Cael crossed the room and sat across from him. I have one unresolved question. Shoot. You have experienced injury, confusion, cultural dissonance, and emotional discomfort, and yet you continued to engage with me. Why? Soren looked at him. Because none of that outweighed the value of what I got back, which is understanding someone I couldn't have understood otherwise. Cael was still for a moment. Then he reached into his satchel and removed a small object, placing it gently on the table between them. It was a thin crystal disc, softly glowing from within. What's this? My final log. It contains my entire field archive. I am permitted to leave a copy with any subject who materially contributed to the mission. Soren picked it up. It was warm. Thanks. It is not a gesture of gratitude. It is a record. Still, thanks. The next morning, Cael departed without ceremony, no speeches, no group photo, just a quiet goodbye in the shuttle bay, a nod, and a final statement. I will not forget you. Soren watched the shuttle lift off, its blue thrusters lighting the platform. When it vanished, he turned and walked back to the Institute. 2 weeks later, a new observer arrived. She approached Soren near the hydrodynamics lab, holding a notepad and a translator module. Excuse me, she said hesitantly. I was told you could explain why humans display their teeth when amused. Soren smiled. I can, he said, but first tell me what you think it means. And so it began again.